Hello there, my name is John Shepherd from Hemsley Fraser, and I'm here with Rita Sookrit to talk today about the changing nature of L&D and HR. So welcome, Rita. Before we get into where we are now, can we just talk a little bit about how we got to this point? So like the evolution of L&D and HR, I guess going back to the e-learning and blended learning sort of approach, and then just talk us through what's developed and evolved since then.
That's a great question, John. And I like the way we're going to take a step back. And, people think that e-learning has been recent, but it actually dates back to the 1990s. And that's where we had the e-learning and the blended learning. I remember my early days in e-learning. I was actually working in Australia when I was out there, and I came back to Canada. They were so far ahead of us. It was unbelievable. But coming back to the 1990s, we started with the e-learning and blended learning. Then we shifted in 2005, where talent management, that's where HR really took over and took control about hiring the right people, the high potentials, nurturing and really catering to the talent development within an organization. Then we started shifting around 2010 to continuous learning because everybody was on the bandwagon about learning. YouTube, getting more information. You could just get it at your fingertips, and continuous learning, lifelong learning. These are just buzzwords that were in the industry. And then by 2017, just prior to the pandemic, we had what's called the digital learning. That's where we started shifting and moving things from that classroom or that blended learning, really going into digital cloud-based learning management systems, LXP, learning record stores, things like that. And then the pandemic hit, and everything sort of got stopped or paused. And what happened was, this is where HR and L&D really stepped in and came to the rescue, because they transitioned the entire workforce from an office to home. And they showed companies that, they were the go-to people to keep continuity going, the business running. And that brings us up to where we are today in 2023. And we're talking about intelligent learning. And what I'd like to say is, we at Hemsley Fraser, we're doing this here with adaptive learning. We started this learning approach back in, I guess, late last year. And it takes artificial intelligence and it really personalized learning. It looks at your clicks and your key strokes that you've taken to respond to a question in the learning design. And it actually modifies that course to you. And that's what we call intelligent learning or adaptive learning or personalized learning. And that's really where we are today in learning and development.
That's perfect. Thanks, Rita. That gives us a really good background. And you've mentioned there a couple of times the pandemic, and obviously how that was a game changer for all things HR and L&D. Could you talk a little bit more about some of the other things that have changed as a result or stemming from the pandemic? Like, for example, learning in the flow of work and social learning. Those are two things I hear all the time from clients.
Yes. When we talk about social learning, I don't know if you recall way back in the 80s, 90s, even 2000s, people would talk about the 70-20-10 model. And let me just clarify this, right? These were a couple of gentlemen that did a study, and they went out to 200 executives and they did this survey and said, how do you like to learn? And they said 70% on the job, 20% social and 10% formal. But when we look at that, when that test was conducted, first of all, they targeted executives. The average person is not an executive. We don't learn like that. We don't have that luxury. And when we look at when that test was done back in the 70s, and social learning is not social learning as it was then. Social learning now includes Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, you name it. This is a whole different brand, and that 70-20-10 model is not, it doesn't sit or resonate well, even here at Hemsley Fraser. We actually look at things that say, how is learning going to have impact? Or how are we going to take learning and align it to the business objectives? And what we have seen from the pandemic, because the pandemic has really given us moment to pause and reset and take a really good hard look at how things are done. and redesign it. This is a one-time deal, and if we don't do it within this window of time, 2022, we might miss that opportunity. What we're seeing is it was a quick fix to get people working remotely during the pandemic, but now what we are noticing is that everybody wants microlearning. Don't give me that long-winded e-learning that's a couple hours long, or that thick manual that's going to take me a whole week to go through. We want short and sweet and nuggets of learning. So if I'm doing my job now, I want 1 or 2 clicks to find information to help me in the flow of work. So let's say, for example, I'm setting up your account in my system and I've forgotten how to enter your information. I just need to go 1 click, get that tool or that video or that job aid and enter the information. So that's what we consider in the flow of work. It doesn't take me away or put me in a classroom for a day or 2 or a week, or it doesn't take me out of the flow and send me on a 20 or an hour e-learning course. It's in the flow of work. That's one of the big things that's coming out, and it's actually been around a lot longer than what we give it credit to, but now it's taking a lot of notice, or companies are actioning this, because the generations in the workplace, we've got up to some will say 9, some will say 5, but we have between 5 and 9 generations. The traditionalists would be in their 70s, and yes, they're still working. For in Canada, we don't have a retirement age, so we have to accommodate those people. They might prefer something a little bit more traditional, but then you have the generations that's coming into the workplace, the millennials, that want the YouTube, the short video, the instant information. It's all about quick and fast. Give it to me and give it to me. Just the facts, nothing else, nothing more. So when we accommodate the generations in the workplace, we have to look at every single one and look at how they're learning, the preferred method and style of learning, and embed or incorporate all of these into our design.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you talked about sort of the last stage in that evolution being intelligent learning, and you touched on the sort of personalized learning. Is that an extension of this, in the, as well as the bite-sized content or the quick and easy content, it needs to be personalized because we haven't got the time to trawl through everything?
Exactly. That's exactly how we were looking at it. And what we're trying to do as well is, with the older generation, we understand this is not probably their method of working, and technology is probably not their, number 1 choice, but they can certainly look at a video and get it, or they could certainly have a job aid or an infographic or another tool like a card or a Q card or a Z card, as we call it here at Hemsley. But they could certainly have other means that will help them in the workplace, but it's just showing them how to get access to it, but on a 1, 2, maybe 3 clicks at the most, nothing more. The intelligent learning, yes, it's probably catered to today's generation and then some, maybe not as far as the baby boomers or traditionalists, but yes, it does cover a lot, especially women. Women love this kind of learning because it really caters to, they love YouTube, they love the video, they love the intelligence of it, they love the fact that they can just, the system is intelligent enough to know where to guide and lead them down that path. And it's really interesting to see how the dynamics of the generations in the workplace and what their preferences are. Number 1, it's definitely the microlearning, the e-learning, and this adaptive learning is taking on a whole new life of its own. Mm-hmm.
And just a couple of other things on where we are now, since the pandemic, because there's a couple of other things that are talked about a lot, and I guess the assumption would be this is for the younger generation too, but like gamification and mobile learning, but that isn't necessarily the case, is it? It could be that gamification is just like badging or something, but how are those things being implemented?
Well, we want engagement, right? And we want interactivity, and gamification, that does it. Branching scenarios, that does it. We want simulations, because simulations replicate or duplicate the real life scenarios, and this is how people want to learn. Don't give me something that's outside of my job. And I think we used to focus on this a fair bit because we wanted to cram everything into a training. That's why we would have it for a week or sometimes 2 weeks. But now the learning is so intelligent and so personalized. It's like, what job are we doing? And let's just cater to that job, And I think that's where we're seeing the windfall, and that's stemming directly from the pandemic, because we had to do quick fixes and quick, I don't want to say band-aid solutions, but we had to come up with some quick solutions, HR and L&D, to get people working and being productive while at home.
Yeah. And obviously we've touched upon the 5 to 9 generations, whatever it might be, within the workplace. Yes. Could we just go into a bit more detail then about how you see HR and L&D collaborate in order to accommodate all these different opinions, perspectives, points of view?
Yeah. I think what's happening before with a lot of companies that are not, and I say this because L&D is at my heart. When we are in corporate, we talk about Andragogy, which is a term that's how adults learn. But if we were to take a step back, a lot of people talk about pedagogy, which is how students learn. And if you think about it, you're in a classroom and the teacher comes in and the teacher has all the information. And they will say, today, John, we're going to learn how to weave a basket. And we just go through and they give you all the information on how to weave this basket. You didn't learn that in school. That's pedagogy. Then Malcolm Knowles introduced us to Andragogy, which is how adults learn. And what he's saying is that, adults come with a lot of experience, bring their experience into the training, design it if you can, and they come to learn because it will improve their lifestyle, which is their work lifestyle, or maybe for a promotion. So they're coming to learn for a clear, objective. Then in 2000, we had 2 gentlemen from Australia. They came up with Heutagogy, which is moving away from pedagogy, Andragogy, because Andragogy, you're kind of, adults learn is facilitation. But then in Heutagogy, the learning is now on me. It's called self-directed learning. I am driving my own learning. And companies have to come to terms with this because, hey, how can you drive your own learning? Because we are a corporate organization. We have KPIs, we have. But honestly, it works, because if I'm driving my own learning, I want to be, in another job, I'm moving towards that career path. And I enlist who I need and what I need, whether it's HR, whether it's my manager, whether it's additional learning, whether it's formal education, I'm driving it and I pull in the resources as I need to guide me in that trajectory I'm heading down. And that's the beauty about self-directed or Heutagogy. And we talked about the other generation, which I learned this term about a year ago, and I love it. It's called Geragogy, and that's older people in the workplace. And we also are accommodating them because we recognize they're not necessarily tech savvy, but they do have a lot that we need, and we need that knowledge, and we need to retain it and somehow capture it and keep it as historical, because that's key information in business today. So that's kind of like the evolution as well, when you start from pedagogy, which is how students learn, and then you come up to Heutagogy and Geragogy in the workplace. It's fascinating. It's learning is much more than learning. It's just so much to it. And when you think about it, we take all this and we always start with the objective of what the business is looking for. What are the outcomes they're seeking? What are the impacts they're looking to gain? And then we work backwards and we address that through the learning strategy.
Yeah. And is it too simplistic to say, Rita, that's the balancing act that HR and L&D or the fine line they're walking, because it's that needs of the business or the organization, but then also the self-directed learning and the different generations, and it is like constantly different angles having to be reached by these two functions effectively.
And this is where HR, because they bring in the talent, they get the talent in, right? And they collaborate with L&D because we can design, we know how to assess the needs of a learner, we know how to assess the needs of the business objectives, we know how to bring the two together. But HR brings in, they staff the organization. And this is why it's key for them to always work so closely together. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And as well as the different generations within the workforce, is there an element of the workforce itself is changing too? You know, the workforce of today is not what the workplace of today is not what the workplace was of 20 years ago.
It is so absolutely true. When we look at, just 2 years ago or 2 and 3 years ago, right? We talked about things like you have your manager in your workplace before pandemic. You would come into the office, you would have a division, like the manager manages, the worker work. Then end of the day, bye John, have a good night, see you tomorrow, you're gone, right? They don't know what you do at home. They don't really care. They're not interested. But then when the work came into the home, what employees, everyone was looking for was you now have the leader or the manager and you have the home, and they wanted a connectivity between the two. They didn't want that separation because you've brought the work into my home, and suddenly you're hearing things about the well-being, right? But hear this, right? Well-being has now extended to not just my personal well-being. It's extended into the workplace, and HR will confirm this, to financial well-being, mental health, social well-being, physical well-being, and career. So this has even branched out into 5 areas, and employees are driving the car now. It's not the companies or the organizations. Because let me say that this has been research, and we've been talking about this for the past years. Employees are looking for the employer. If their values don't align with theirs, they will say thank you, but no thank you, and they'll go on to the next job. So we have to take notice of this and listen to what our employees are saying over we really have to hear what they're saying, because if they're not getting it from us, they will go elsewhere, because there's no loyalty. There never was.
Yeah.
And
just as a final question then, because we began this conversation talking about sort of the evolution of HR and L&D, and you went through sort of like 5 stages, if you like, over a period of what, 20, 30 years. Yeah. Do you see the pace of change just getting quicker and quicker? I mean, is this collaboration between HR and L&D just going to keep getting more and more important as the pace of change increases?
I absolutely believe that, John. And I'm not saying this because I'm in L&D and I want to be relevant. HR and L&D have proven their value. We heard the conversation many times in the past years. They want a seat at the table. They want to be acknowledged. They want to be recognized. But it's been proven that companies that invested in their people during the pandemic, that actually considered learning and the well-being on these different scales, they're the ones that are thriving and are coming out. But let's add to that, we know people are leaving. We understand why they're leaving, because if their values don't align, they're not interested. I'm not talking maybe about the older generation, but certainly women are doing this and the younger generations. And what we need to do, HR and L&D, is to really understand, like, who's likely to leave and why are they leaving? Like, there has to be trends in an organization why people are leaving. Is it their boss? People don't quit their jobs, they quit their bosses, right? Is it lack of career development? I know you laugh when I say that, but it's a fact, right? People don't necessarily quit their jobs. Am I getting enough growth opportunities in this organization? Because am I getting enough learning? Because I want to be relevant as well. I want my skills. Am I getting other projects that are of interest to me that will broaden my skill set? Those are some things to consider. And then what we need to do is build career paths to move into these different directions, if you want to call it. The biggest thing employees are saying is that they don't want the leadership top down anymore. They don't want hands-on, side by side, over my shoulder leadership. We work remotely. We need trust. We need you to believe that we're here working. And what we're looking for is some kind of empowerment to self-manage ourselves. And this is a big shift coming. And this is where, we could go down another path talking about the dynamics of leadership and how it's moving, how it's changing, how it's evolving. But if I were to say, those are like the top 3 things we'd be concerned about HR and L&D is why are people leaving? Let's figure it out, let's build a career path to keep them engaged, keep them happy, keep them learning. And then of course, reinvent our leadership. We want them to be more human, more vulnerable, more, more people geared as opposed to the almighty dollar about profits and stuff. Yes, we are interested in that, but the people has to come first. It's not the business anymore. Mm-hmm.
As you alluded to there, Rita, we could carry on talking for hours, I'm sure, but for now, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and your insights. Really interesting. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, John.